Thank you for coming to our 33rd Disruptor series. It's great to have you all here. We've got a really fantastic program, as you know. We're kicking off Women's History Month with, I love this line, with one of the most important women of our time. And frankly, as you'll see when you hear her, she's really one of the most important women of all time. She really, and it's, of course, Maria Shriver. Our world is very chaotic now, and what I heard just in a few minutes of Maria speaking is that she can organize the chaos. And I think that is what's very special about her book that you guys have, and I think that's what's very special about tonight. In a world that has truly been disrupted, she really understands things in a way that I really haven't heard from anybody else. So we're really in for a treat tonight. Just so you know, I mean, listen, she's an author, a journalist, an activist. She's a former First Lady of California, of course, and she's a mom. So in a lot of ways, she's unlike us, and in a lot of ways, she's just like us. So I think you'll see that when you talk to her, when she talks out here tonight. She's won an Emmy, a Peabody Award. She's also been a real crusader in the fight against Alzheimer's. And she's got some very interesting facts about that. Some of us have aging grandparents or parents who are suffering, and she's really got a very interesting progress there. Her book, which you guys have, it's called I've Been Thinking, Reflections, Prayers, and Meditations for a Meaningful Life. She's going to share some of these reflections with us tonight. She's going to be interviewed by our very own Mr. Doug Melville, our Chief Diversity Officer. So without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's give a warm welcome to the incomparable Maria Shriver.
I want to thank everybody for being here. I know it's really busy and everybody probably could be at the gym. And that's where, or some happy hour, so thank you for delaying. I also could be at the gym.
Yeah, or happy hour.
Yeah, so I ate some plantation chips. We'll eat more of them later, but I'm glad to be here with you.
Okay, well, thank you so much for coming by. It's a real honor. I am not a journalist. I watched your video online with Chelsea Handler, tips to be a good journalist. So I prepared.
You did.
Because you were giving her a really good lesson on her Netflix show. Just for the audience to know, Maria's tips for being a good journalist: listen, don't interrupt, do not drink before an interview.
These were tailored for her.
Okay.
Yes. I don't normally have to tell people not to drink before an interview.
Don't date guests. Oh, that was for her.
Don't date guests. Yeah, no, I told her that too.
And most importantly, rely on facts. So.
No, I told her not to curse too.
Oh, and not curse.
Yes, because she says the F word all the time in her interviews, which is totally unacceptable. So I told her that was unacceptable.
Well, yeah, there'll be no cursing here tonight. Okay. We have a curse jar in the back just for $1.
I have one of those at home, actually, for my children. They have to put money in the curse jar.
And then you buy Christmas presents with it.
No.
So I just really... So I want to just start, before we dive into the book, and it really is an amazing read. I listened to it on the audio tape and as well as the traditional book. But I kind of just want to ask a few questions about essentially journalism to start with. Kind of what are your thoughts about the state of journalism today?
I'm excited. I know we're hearing everything about fake media, but I think there's some really extraordinary journalism going on. And I think there's a new interest in journalism. Obviously, we see people watching the news more than we have in the past, reading the news more than we have in the past. I think subscriptions at the New York Times, the Washington Post, et cetera, are all up. And I think we see some extraordinary journalism going on. That said, there is quote, things masquerading as journalism that's not journalism. So I think it's really an important time for everyone and to be a citizen journalist, so to speak, themselves, to find out where their information is coming from, fact check their own information. As I always say to my kids when they go, I saw this, I read this, I go, where'd you get that? We've got to know where we're getting our information from. We all have our own trusted sources. I stay pretty much kind of, I guess it's more old-fashioned, but I stay with sources that I know are reputable, that I know check their facts, check their sources. When I started in journalism 40 years ago, yeah, right? Whoa, I look good, okay? Okay, I look good. But way before probably anybody here was born, but they gave me a binder, like this thick of what I had to memorize, what were the rules of journalism, how you couldn't ask somebody a question a second time, how you had to make sure you took the person's answer to the question, that you couldn't edit in another answer to a question, all of these rules, and if you didn't abide by them, you were fired. And now people come in to journalism, they haven't gone to journalism school, they don't get a binder, they don't have the rules, and we're in a news cycle that is 24/7. So, which is why in the book I write about the power of the pause. And so I think it's a dangerous time, but also an exciting time for journalism.
And what are your thoughts on just the state generally of politics today? I mean, it's kind of tied in with the
I'm
news,
excited about politics too.
There's a lot of new people entering.
Yeah,
it's really,
I think it's
the casual fan is getting off the bench and kind of.
Yeah, and I think that's important. I grew up in a political family, and I tried to get my kids interested in politics my whole life, and they weren't interested in it until Donald Trump ran. So all of a sudden they started paying attention. They now know what a special prosecutor is. They followed the Supreme Court decision. They woke up. And despite the fact that they came from my family, despite the fact that their dad ran for governor, despite the fact that their dad was governor and I was first lady, they couldn't have been less interested. And which I find is fascinating. So I think that they and a lot of other people woke up. So I think that that is exciting. I myself, as I said, was raised in a Democratic family, found myself campaigning for someone who was a Republican running for governor, and then served as a Democratic First Lady in a Republican administration, which was complex and complicated at best, but we won't talk about that. But what it did teach me was that there are good people in both parties. There are good people who have good ideas in both parties. And it also taught me and gave me a front row seat to the problems in both parties. And they're deep, they're systemic, and they're bureaucratic. And I left the Democratic Party after I finished being First Lady because I was as disappointed in the Democratic Party as I was in the Republican Party. And in California, we have a very a lot of young people signing on to be what we call declined estates, AKA independents. And I think that we will begin to see people who identify as independents surpass the other two parties. And I think the other two parties haven't responded in creative and innovative ways. And I think that's one of the big problems with politics today is that creative people, innovative people don't go in, or the bureaucracy is so big and so tough that it doesn't appeal to people who are creative or innovative, because you have to go through so many meetings and processes and stuff like that, that those people either don't come in, or if they come in, they want to go out. But I think if we get a third party, a real viable third party, and people run like that, I think you will see those other two parties change in dramatic ways.
Yeah. Do you think politicians need to get back to the service part of being a politician? I think
I think some people are. Certainly my nephew, Joe Kennedy, who gave the Democratic response, is very much in service. If I were running for office, I would implement mandatory service in this country. I think we're one of the few countries that don't have mandatory service, and it's a great equalizer. You'd get people to really pay attention if you required everybody. It's a form of a draft in a way, but if you required everybody to give 2 years of service to their country, I think people would really wake up. Yeah. And I think, whether it's the Peace Corps, AmeriCorps, Teach for America, whatever floats your boat, AmeriCorps, I think that we should give something to our country other than our taxes. And I think it's a great learning experience. It gets you out of your neighborhood. I used to believe that everybody should work in a presidential campaign once in their life. I worked in several, and it's an incredible learning experience to go to states, meet people in states that you know nothing about, because so many states are like a world away. From the experience you're having here. Go live in Alabama, go live in Iowa, go live in Ohio, and you will meet Americans who have nothing in common, or you think have nothing in common with you, but actually in many ways have the same dreams, the same hopes, the same economic aspirations and stuff. So I think that that's one of the things I guess I'm more concerned about, is our lack of common ground or perceived common ground. and the division, which I think can be healed, but we have to start speaking a similar language and have some similar experiences. And I think service, national service, would be an incredible place to begin.
Yeah, I think when we work with clients, we try to get them more to get involved in service and charity and donations. And coming from the Madison Avenue community, what would be your suggestion for us to work with clients and brands to get them as excited about service
well, I think
as
there's
the individual?
a lot of cool things. I just did a big profile on Mark Benioff this week on the Today Show, who runs Salesforce, and they give people paid time to volunteer at Salesforce. And I think, you know, for many people, they want to volunteer and they want to participate, but they, you know, have got kids at home. They might be a single parent. They're working paycheck to paycheck. They don't have time. So if their company says, look, we pay for 4 or 5 days, and that's part of our ethos, that's part of our culture, and you can volunteer wherever you see fit, and we're going to support that, that changes their ability to participate. Another thing that I'd really like corporate America to do is to give people paid time to participate in clinical trials, which I believe is a form of national service. We need so many people to participate, whether it's an Alzheimer's trial, a cancer trial, an AIDS trial. We have a dearth of people who will participate in trials because it's hard, it's difficult, and it's expensive. And if they were able to take time off once a month to go participate in an Alzheimer's trial, that would change really science and medicine and our future. So I think that's a big thing that companies can do, you know, through their human resource departments, and it would change the culture, I think, of the company.
Yeah, that's a great area because people don't really talk about the size of clinical trials or how many people are donating blood or participating in medical studies. So I think that's a huge
big thing that we're
opportunity.
trying to do with Alzheimer's is to get more and more women and younger people into clinical trials, because we're trying to understand how the brain changes, and the brain begins to change at 25. At 25. And Alzheimer's is 20 to 25 years in your brain before you begin to show signs, or in your parents' brain. And so we need to, people were studying people with Alzheimer's and trying to solve the problem once they had it. And now we've switched really to preventing it, trying to understand what is the difference between a brain at 40 and a brain at 50. What happens in a brain from 50 to 60? What happens in a woman's brain when she's perimenopausal, or when she's had a child and now she's menopausal? And we can only do that if people volunteer for clinical trials.
Right, and Alzheimer's affects women more so.
Yeah,
than
that's,
men.
and I was saying to your boss, or what's he?
Well, he's the CEO.
Oh, he's the CEO, okay. So he's the boss, right?
The check's clear, so that's
the check's
important.
clear. He's the ultimate disruptor, right, or whatever, or something. Right? But he was trying to figure out how I was a disruptor, and so he tried to tell you that, asked me a question so I could kind of fit into the disruptor model. And I said, no, wait a second. I've been a disruptor in the Alzheimer's space, in the First Lady space, and in this space. He said, oh, okay. Yeah, so, right. But I said, because when I got involved in Alzheimer's, my dad had Alzheimer's, and I was First Lady of California at the time, and I ran a big women's conference out there. And disrupt there, because people said, well, you can't run a big women's conference, you're First Lady. And I said, I'm going to build the biggest women's conference in the world. And it's going to pay for me and pay for everything that I want to do as First Lady, because when you're First Lady of a state, you have a door there that says you're a special project, and you have no budget or anything. And so I was like not down to be someone's special project, or not down to have a budget.
That's not very inspiring.
No, it's not. Like,
when you go to your door, you got your office, special project?
I know, it's so like, as my mother would say, unattractive. So, but anyway, when I got involved at the women's conference, I started programming. I thought, I want to learn more about Alzheimer's, so I'll program some tracks about caregiving, about Alzheimer's, and more women started saying, you know, I'm a caregiver, my mom has Alzheimer's, I'm a caregiver. My mom is 60 with Alzheimer's, 65.
Got it.
And so I would go to the Alzheimer's Association and doctors and say, you know, there's more and more women. Not only are women 2/3 of all the caregivers in this country, but there are also people getting Alzheimer's. And they said, no, that's not true. They just get it because they live longer. And I'm like, no, that's not true. And they're like, yeah, it is. And I'm like, okay. I'm going to disrupt that concept. And so I did a big thing called the Shriver Report. I did a big poll, and I spent several years researching it. And lo and behold, guess who was right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
So 2/3 of all the brains being diagnosed now belong to women, and no one knows why that is. So lo and behold, none of the doctors or researchers anywhere had studied women. Oh, yeah, so they hadn't studied women's brains. So now they are studying women's brains, and I fund a lot of that research across the country, and I'm asking people to look at the role of estrogen, to look at X chromosome, to look at how women process inflammation and other things. And I say that's not sexist, that's just smart, because you want to study where the majority of the cases are, and the results will benefit us all.
Yeah, I think with women being at the table, we're going to see a lot of new things uncovered because.
Well, I'm hopeful that women being at the table will see men at the table as well. I think women, if they want to truly lead, we don't want to lead in a way that excludes men, but I think brings men to the table. I think, there's no reason for a woman to lead in exactly the same way as a man, because we've seen that. So I think the goal is to figure out, how do we lead differently? And so I think we want to lead from a place of compassion. We want to put strength in the concept of caring. I think women communicate well, they use their words well, they collaborate well, and those qualities, I think, will really benefit companies, they benefit government, and they're really good for families as well. And I think it's really important as we move forward to develop our emotional intelligence. I think that's really important for men as well. As I say to my sons, I want you to be strong and kind. I want you to be smart, but I also want you to have emotional intelligence. So I want you to get the cue from me when I'm speaking to you. I want, and I want you to,
Is it working?
It's good. I just had a fight with my son on the phone. So coming over, he goes, you don't have to argue with me. I said, I'm not arguing with you through text, really. Anyway, so I think women, women at the table is good, but I don't think at the expense of not having men at the table. I think, I think that's really important.
So I want to actually, everyone in the audience got a copy of your book. I just want to give a huge round of applause to the #1 book in America, ladies and gentlemen. And I want to talk a moment just about the title. I've been thinking Reflections, Prayers, and Meditations for a Meaningful Life. So what kind of drove you for this as your next book? You've written books in the past, but what was the driving force behind this particular book?
Well, because I've been thinking a lot about a lot of stuff, how I got here, where I'm going, what the hell happened, what's going on, all sorts of things. And I write a weekly blog column called I've Been Thinking. I have a Sunday paper newsletter that comes out every Sunday, and it's news and views above the noise for people with passion and purpose. And so every week I write what I've been thinking, and so do a lot of other people. And the readers of that newsletter, who are very committed and very compassionate and quite intelligent, said, could you put these columns into one place, because they're inspirational, they're hopeful, they're motivating. So I really responded to their request. But as I got going, I thought, I want to combine them with quotes, because I'm a big quote person, and I get inspiration from other people's tales and wisdom. And I'm also a deeply spiritual person, so I start and end my day with a prayer. So I wanted to start and end each of these with a prayer. And if God doesn't speak to you, you can take the word God out and add, whoever it is you're talking to, or you can just eliminate anybody's name. But I think that's what's helped me. Other people's stories, quotes, my spiritual life, and thinking to get clear about what I think, what's important for me, and my desire to really live a meaningful life. I think people want that. They want to live a meaningful life. I think people want to know that they matter to their companies, to their significant others, to their children, to their community. And I hope this book speaks to that.
Yeah, I had a chance to, like I said, read and listen to it. One quote that stood out to me the most, I just want to read this. It's a little bit long, but women, when seen and heard and validated, can do anything. Women are an asset. You must nurture it, value it, and care for it. If you're a woman, never doubt you belong at the table. never forget to bring something unique, and never forget to save a seat at the table. I thought that was really powerful and really spoke volumes to the moment and the time we're in. How do you think this moment's gonna look later, 50 years, 75 years down the road? Because do you feel that there's an awakening happening in the United States of America with women globally as well as domestically?
Yeah, well, I don't think there's the same awakening happening in other parts of the world where, women are still being married off at 10 and 11 years of age. Women are still being prostituted. Women are the majority of people who live in poverty. Child mortality is high. So some of the issues we're talking about on Madison Avenue are not being discussed when someone's carrying, a jug of water and their children are malnourished and dying. So the conversations are different. I myself don't really worry about what's going to happen in 75 years because I'm really trying to focus on what's happening now. And if we focus too much into the future or focus too much on the past, we lose the moment that we're in. And what, to me, that quote says is that really everybody wants to be seen, not for the family that they're born into, for the job that they have, but I think we all have a deep need to be seen as ourselves, your name, not what you do. We live in a society where everybody asks you when you go to the cocktail party or the Disruptor series, what do you do? What do you do? And I'm really interested in who are you? I'm really interested in who are you? What is your Anna, thank you, Anna. No, I think that's really important. Thank you for saying that because Anna is different from Angela. And they have common needs, which is to be seen, to be respected, to be valued, to be loved, to be able to put food on the table and live beyond paycheck to paycheck. And then their individual experiences are different, but that need resonates across females, males, other genders, right? So I think that that's a really important common ground place that we all have. And I think so often, people have anxiety about do they belong at the table?
Sure.
And, thinking like someone else is smarter than you, someone else belongs there and I don't. And I think what I was trying to say in putting that quote in there is that you belong. Whether you're an immigrant, a refugee, a woman, whatever, you belong. And that's powerful. So pull up a chair. And it's important to pull up a chair for someone else because there's always someone kind of with their back up against the wall who doesn't feel that they belong.
Yeah. And also you talk about being
And that's disruptive, by the way.
It is. No, it
no,
is.
That
the first
is
thing,
disruptive.
Yeah.
That's disruptive.
I think we have lost some of the humanity in the,
Yeah.
What do you do and where are you from instead of, how are you today?
Right.
Very simple things that actually go a long way. And
we were just talking when I came in here because I saw this story about what I guess they're calling the dumb phone that's trending all over, and people wanting this phone that only makes phone calls and has texts on it without everything else, and people hearkening for a simpler time. And I think that speaks to the success of this book. Even the publisher was like stunned. They came to me and they're like, what this book is like exploding. I was like, I don't know why. I have no idea either. But I think it speaks to, a yearning that we all have about the basics in life.
Sure.
Right.
And you have 65 mini chapters in there that are almost
this is
long
like
stanzas.
Bedside reading.
Sure.
This is like pick it up. No one's gonna bite you. It's not gonna. It's positive.
It's very re-inspiring.
I've
I've been walking through the streets of New York listening to it, going, okay, yeah.
But I think that people
the power of the pause.
Right.
Look around, enjoy your environment, understand, what's happening
from
around you.
a speech I gave to journalism students who don't take a pause.
Yeah.
And
well, I don't think many of us do because you're kind of in the hustle and bustle. The fear of missing out is kind of the one way of thinking.
I think that's destructive.
Yeah.
I think it's really destructive to your health. Stress is really destructive. We live in a 24-hour cycle. And by the way, your job's going to spit you out onto the curb. That's the truth. I've been fired, and I made the mistake initially when I was the anchor of the CBS Morning News. I thought, oh my God, this is my family. Oh my God, everybody loves me. It's so great. And boom, I got fired. The whole show got canceled and fired. And I was like stunned. And everybody just went right along, they didn't care. And when I had my first child, I was anchoring the Saturday evening news. I was anchoring the Sunday Today show, and I lived in Los Angeles, and one of the shows was anchored in New York, and then I would fly down to Washington and anchor the next show, and then I'd go shoot a story, and I went to my boss, and I said, I can't keep this schedule. Could you move the nightly news to LA, because nobody cares where the desk is and stuff like that. He's like, no, and I'll fill your job in 30 seconds. And he did. And he did. And it's the nature of the beast. So this is not your family. This is not, you may be really nice, he's really nice, but they're not your, yeah. And you're dispensable. You're dispensable. And so implement some boundaries. That's kind of disruptive, but it's true. And, your job is great, but don't think it's your life.
Yeah.
That's really important because especially living in this kind of 24-hour thing, we think we have to be on call. I spoke today, you're entitled to boundaries. Yeah. You're entitled to a life, and if your boss doesn't think so, you shouldn't be working there anyway.
Yes, that's a good philosophy.
Yeah.
I think it all goes back to just having perspective and empathy and pausing.
Boundaries.
So, boundaries.
Yeah.
Did you want to read some of your favorite quotes
from
the
done?
book? Yeah, no, well, No, we're not done. But you said you wanted to have everybody have
at the end.
Oh, we'll read it at the end. Okay, yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to skip to the end here. I just, I was all excited to.
Oh, okay.
So let me ask one question. Do you have a vision board at home?
I have had a vision board at home, yeah.
Do you recommend that for people?
I do. I have pretty clear vision in my head. But I think whatever works for you. Some people are very visual people. My daughter, really wanted to make a vision board. And so I made one with her, and mine was, I write in the book, was really, it comes off of a Rumi poem. I'm a big Rumi fan, who's a mystic poet, and I read a lot of poetry. I write a lot of poetry, and I've been very influenced by Hafiz and Rumi. And Rumi has this great two-lined thing. It's called out beyond wrongdoing and right doing, there's a field. I'll meet you there. And I jumped off of that into what I perceive to be the open field. And I kind of wrote to out beyond right doing and wrongdoing, out beyond shame, guilt, judgment, pain, and fear. There's an open field. I'll meet you there. And I really have that as my vision, out beyond gender, out beyond political persuasion, out beyond net worth, out beyond job title, out beyond all of these things that are restrictive. And that keep us in these kind of, I think, boxes. I believe there's an open field, and that's where I live. That's who are the people that I want to be with, and I want to think forward that way. And I believe in thinking and manifesting. I think things will be. So I cruise around in the open field, and here nobody's kind of thinking that, but it's in my head. And it's in my head politically, professionally, personally, and I like it.
One of the things, one of the things that I enjoy about hearing that is the fact you don't want to be pigeonholed.
No.
And I think, in this day and time, pigeonholing people is kind of what we do subconsciously, without even giving it thought.
Well, we're judgmental. That's another way of saying it. And we're always constantly making judgments about people, about their clothes, about their hair, about their weight, about where they come from, where they were educated, all of these things. And so, I think it gets us in trouble because no one is ever, what they are on paper. And so I think we don't take the time to find out who she is. Where does she move? We make they went to Yale, they went to Harvard, they got the MBA, they had this, they must be smart. No, it's not that way in reality, right? Can they see you? Are they good? What's their character? Do they take responsibility? What's their work ethic?
So how do we change the narrative for that? We have to do it individually, one person at a time.
Yeah, and I think kind of having a culture, right? Having a culture that's what we value. We take the time, we pause and take the time to actually figure out who the person is. What are they good at? What do they want to do? How can I support them become the person that they want? What story do they want to tell? You know, and some businesses I think are better at that than others. I think there's a lot of that going on in California in terms of certain businesses that to me is, you know, is exciting. You know, like across the street at 30 Rock, that's not going on at all. Yeah. But, you know.
What's going on over there?
Like, not that. I tell you, there's no meditation room at 30 Rock.
Yeah. We need meditation rooms, yeah. Well, meditation's important because I believe it was your father that had a phrase that it was go internal so you can be eternal.
Right. I included that quote because my dad, as I mentioned, had Alzheimer's. And it's really kind of mind-blowing to sit across from somebody who is recognized as one of the great thinkers of all time, came up with the Peace Corps, came up with the War on Poverty, Job Corps, Legal Services, AmeriCorps, you name it, Vista, all came out of my father's thinking. And that's a lot.
Yeah.
Right? That's a smart guy. And then to sit across from that guy when he says, what's that? Who are you? What are those things?
Right.
So that really kind of blows your mind, right? To sit and think about that, right?
It's intimidating.
Well, it's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
It's indescribable. Makes no sense, right? But so when I was talking to him, and then, you know, he would just mainly sit in silence, and so I had been sitting with him in total silence, and you just sit there, and then he just turned to me, and he looked at me in the eyes, and he goes, you got to go internal if you want to be eternal. And I was like, whoa. Wow. And then he went back into whatever world he was living in.
Yeah.
But it, to me, was it was a moment that got me thinking. And I thought, you know, he's right. I had been always in pursuit of external success, thinking that would make someone know my name, and not just the family I came from. And my drive was for that, and it left me empty. And, you know, I was the anchor of the Today Show, I was the anchor of the Morning News, I won a Peabody, and nothing changed. And when I started to go internal, not to go eternal, but to just find peace and to find meaning, that's where I found my ba-boom.
Right.
So I think, you know, these moments, whether they come from someone with Alzheimer's, whether they come from the guy parking your car, whether they come from the guy giving you the cup of coffee, the lessons are everywhere. And if you are present and you pause and you look around and you lack the judgment that you think only the really smart people can give you lessons, they're everywhere for all of us.
One thing you touched about was how hard it was to get yourself to go internal and meditate. And it was because you're busy and you're you know, you multitask and you're an amazing mother and you have all these jobs.
My brother,
and now you had to
Bobby, tells the story when I went first to the yoga class with him, and then there was the, you know, at the end of the yoga class, everybody was like lying there quiet, and I was like, what's happening? And he's like, this is where we pause. I'm like, oh, no, I started doing crunches, and he's like, Marie, get out of the room. I was like, I cannot sit still. And it was hard for me.
Yeah, how do you?
I practiced it. I couldn't sit still because I was afraid of what would come up.
Wow.
Yeah, and a lot of, you know what came up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think, you know, one of the challenges is getting people to change their routines.
Yeah.
People are in their zone, in their box, in their rhythm, and that's just kind of where they fit in the rivet. And, you know,
I meet so many people who've changed their routines, and some, you know, change it because they get hit by a 2x4, you know, and that is.
Does it take an aha moment to change, or you feel
it
people
takes
could just do
something
it?
to change, a desire, a longing, an exhaustion, a belief that this can't be the way it's supposed to be. I mean, I talk to so many people who are like, this can't be. I'm not supposed to be working 24 hours a day around the clock, living like this, working. This can't be my life. And I think whenever you think this can't be, it shouldn't be. And that's your trigger. Aha, that's your trigger, that's your whatever. Some people, it's more brutal than that. And that can get you to change. But I think that, you know, I think that's why I tried to write about what is a meaningful life, and each of us answer that in different ways. But I try to write about what is power, what is faith, what is success. You know, is there such a thing as a smart, kind man? What is the power of women? What is, and there is. But I think a lot of women, you know, certainly when I was growing up, that wasn't the, you know, that wasn't out there like that.
Yeah.
And so,
how do you see the changes generationally? So from your mother's thinking to yours, to your daughters.
Well, I think, you know, people are more evolved, right? They're more, you know, I think a lot of the men who are in their 30s today and stuff are raised by women who expected different things from their sons, and want them to be different kinds of partners and husbands. I expect a lot from my sons. And, you know, I expect them to be involved and evolved husbands and partners. And so I don't know whether, you know, other generation, I don't think they were given the same to-do list or the same, you know, expectations. And so, like, I'm a lot like my mom, but very different from my mom. And if you want to just talk, since we are talking Women's History Month here, and this is called the Disruptor series, I'm just going to shout out for a second to my mother, who was the ultimate disruptor. You know, this is a woman who created the Special Olympics, who changed the world, and thank God there's a book coming out about her next month. And it's called Eunice, the Kennedy Who Changed the World. And this was a woman raised in a family of men by a man who never noticed a woman. And she clawed her way. And she fought and fought on behalf of other people. Her purpose was to change the world on behalf of people with intellectual disabilities, to make it possible for them to compete in athletics, to be educated, to live alongside, to work in places like this. You, by the way, should hire a person with intellectual disabilities, because the unemployment rate is about 98%, and they do very well in jobs at like reception desks or routine jobs. So that's something you could do that would disrupt your culture. But she was just a ball buster, and she was tough, and she was relentless, and she wore men's clothes, and she, you know, played tackle football, and she hung with men, and she changed policy, and she changed the world, and she did it to her dying day. And she's finally, now 9 years after her death, going to get a book that tells her story. But it wasn't ever given her due in life, because when she stood next to her brothers, people didn't know her name. And I think, you know, that's a thing. You know, we're often very blinded by the light and the fame and the person over here, and the person standing next to them could be the most important person in the room, and we don't even look. Yeah.
Why do you think we do that as a culture? Because it's very obvious.
It's exciting to see somebody like, and I think we're seeing that now with our, you know, current choice of a president. You know,
couldn't even say president.
Yeah, well,
it was hard to get it out.
No, because, you know, I went to, and I write about this in my book, I went to a retreat to Father Richard Rohr, who I follow, and with my brother, and he said something which I thought was incredibly simple but profound, and he said, if you have a soul, and you all do, so does the person next to you, and so does your enemy. They also have a soul. And if you think you should be forgiven, so does your enemy. So Donald Trump has a soul, and Donald Trump has a heart. And you have to, you know, you can be pissed, you can be angry, and there's plenty to be pissed and angry about, but there's a human being there. And so how we manage that, and how I've never seen anybody really become a better human being by being shamed. I'm always fascinated by people that, you know, piss me off and push my buttons, and I try to find out about their childhood and why they think that, and, you know, where they came from, and I always look at their relationship with their mother. Yeah, no, I try to kind of understand that, and particularly with men who are angry.
Yeah, my mom always would make me date people and how do they treat their mother.
Yeah.
You know, that was the first question that she would ask me. How do they treat their mother? Do they still love their mother? Do they still talk to their mother? So.
Well, I think that's a very good piece of advice to anybody, male or female, is to look at their relationship with the people that are close to them in their life.
She also used to tell me that my dad never changed a diaper, 3 kids, and she always raised me to make sure that I changed 50% of the diapers.
Do you?
Because I don't have kids.
Oh.
Yeah. Yes, I changed 100% of the non-existent diapers. You end the book with 60 lessons for life, which are amazing. I wish I could read them all. They're practical and inspirational. I mean, personally, I like number 10. Don't believe people who tell you that they can eat anything and still be skinny.
I know,
lying.
I hate those people.
Yeah, no, number 10 was definitely my favorite.
So many women like that. It's like, I just don't eat anything, and I'm a size 2. I'm like, you are such a liar.
But I didn't know if you wanted to share some of your favorite from that list, or actually go into reading some of the
I gave that list to my kids, and I sit down with my kids.
Should we all open the book together? You want to read it?
Yeah. Well, I wanted to actually. Are we finished?
Yeah. We're not finished, but.
Oh well, I don't need to read those.
I did want to just have you share anything that you wanted to you made note of.
Okay. Well. I had this really powerful moment last night. I went out to Long Island, and when you go on these book tours, they kind of go here, go there, you don't really kind of paying attention to where you're going. And so they said, you're going out to Long Island and you're gonna do a book thing. And I'm like, okay. And then it took like 2.5 hours to get out there, and I'd been working on the Today Show. I was like tired, And so I went, I was waiting in this little room, and then they're like, okay, then you're going to walk out, just like you said, you're going to walk out onto the stage. And I walked there, I heard my name, and I walked out onto the stage, and it was this giant auditorium. And there were like rafters, it was packed. So like 1,000 people packed and everything. And I walked out, and I'm like, I'm in the wrong room. I was like, I'm in the wrong auditorium, because like these people couldn't possibly be here for my book. I looked around, I was like, whoa, and I looked to the left, I looked to the right, and then I looked up, and I'm like, holy shit, these people came to, for my book and for me. And I almost burst into tears. I was so overwhelmed by this moment, because I was flabbergasted. And then everybody had the book, and I said, oh, I want to read something, and everybody, like that's all opened the book. Of course, the real book, and started reading together, and it was dark, and everybody had their book, and everybody was quiet, and it was one of the most moving. There wasn't a phone on. Nobody picked up a camera, and it was at college, and it was silent. And I read this poem in here, which was really life-altering for me, by Mary Oliver. And you could have heard a pin drop, and I gotta say, it was one of the greatest moments of my life. Wow. And in this kind of insane world that we're all living in, and to actually have a physical book, and people open it and read along, and are quiet, and got up and walked out. I was just like, damn. I was like, damn, I'm gonna order room service. Damn.
Tip number 60, order room service.
No, so I wanna read the journey, even though these aren't my words.
Should we all read it together with you? No,
yeah, just open it up. It's on page.
Like a prayer service.
I like that. It's on page 82, is that?
All right,
87?
Everyone, we're gonna need you to open your book to page 82.
No, it's not 82. I can't see. What does it say? 87.
87, yep, 87.
And I include, as I said, I include quotes, and, but this woman is one of my heroes, and she became a really good friend of mine, is a good friend of mine. She's in her late 80s, and she's an extraordinary woman, and her God is nature, and she prays in nature, so you can pray. Pray in my hotel room or wherever. But this, I think we're all on a journey, and I believe that probably part of the reason you're here is that you're on a journey too, to have a meaningful life. And sometimes we don't know what that is, and sometimes we fall down, and sometimes we're, ashamed and feel guilty and afraid. And I write about all of that because I have felt all of that, and I still feel like I'm living a meaningful life. And so I think that the pursuit of a meaningful life is a worthy pursuit. It's available to all of us. It has really nothing to do with your job and everything to do with your values, your character, and your own path. So I love this poem because it spoke to me at a difficult time in my own life and gave me tremendous courage. So I just want to, as you head out onto Madison Avenue, read it to you. And it goes like this. One day you finally knew what you had to do and began. Though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice, though the whole house began to tremble and you felt the old tug at your ankles. Mend my life, each voice cried, but you didn't stop. You knew what you had to do, though the wind pried with its stiff fingers at the very foundation, though their melancholy, pause, I turn the page, was terrible. It was already late enough and a wild night in the road full of fallen branches and stones. But little by little, as you left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds, and there was a new voice. That's very important. There was a new voice, which you slowly recognized as your own, that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could save. And I love that because so often our voices get drowned out by someone else's thinking. They get drowned out by people we think know more than us. And I must say that every time I thought I knew something and someone talked me out of it, I was right. And I gave my power away to other people's thoughts. And so this I really like because you have to have some practice of silence or pausing or something to hear your voice. And your voice is your best ally, and it will be with you forever, long after we leave this place, this job, this environment. And my hope is that you trust it, you become comfortable with it, you listen to it, you don't doubt it, and you follow it. Because life is full of tough decisions, it's full of loss, it's full of grief. And as I say to my kids, don't think shit's not gonna happen to you. Right. Because it does. And how you handle it makes all the difference. And that's available to all of us. So my hope is that this little book will find its way to your bedside table, your bathroom stall, or wherever, and will inspire you. It's a super easy read. And I also hope it will comfort you in what I think are turbulent times in our country. But everything you need is already within you. And that's the best piece of advice and gift that I can give you, is that you are way stronger. One of my favorite quotes is from Emerson that says, what lies behind us and what lies in front of us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us. So what lies within you is all you will ever need. And my hope is that you trust that, because that's the most disruptive concept on the planet. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
You've been listening to the Disruptor Series podcast, brought to you by TBWA Chiat New York. Craving more disruption? Visit us at tbwaschiatny.tumblr.com.